According to a recent survey by Bain and Company, changeability is the primary source of competitive advantage in a business environment forever shifted by COVID-19. Research shows that companies who have a higher change power grow faster and have stronger leaders and more engaged employees. So how can business leaders brace for change and act to change? Today's episode focuses on ways you can create a system, a framework called change management, to lead your organization to success. Hello, and welcome back to Breadcrumbs, the podcast from WorkSync. Today, we're joined by members of our product team at WorkSync with some insights into organizational change. Could you introduce yourselves?
Be glad to, Kim. I'm Dave Herring, and I'm out of our Farmington Hills location.
Hey, Kim. Joe Thompson, product manager, and out of the West Michigan office.
We have a lot of offices in Michigan.
There's an office of one.
Yes. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Welcome. And what exactly is change management? Why is it important?
Well, change management's all about the people side of change. And it's critical because without inspiring people to make the change, whatever you're working on, whether it's a technical project or just an organizational change initiative, it's not going to be successful until you've gotten the individuals to embrace and adopt the change that you're trying to implement.
Right. So let's put this into context of this business and our industry here, workforce management. So I've read up on some recent statistics. About 70% of change efforts in this area fail. That includes projects to change software, which is what we do every day. Have you seen any efforts fail because of groups that don't have a plan?
Unfortunately, all the time. You said, 70% of projects do fail. And a lot of it just goes back to, organizations not properly prepping their teammates to be successful. One, they don't understand what the change is all about. And, until you understand it and take some other critical steps, you're just not going to be able to embrace the change. So again, unfortunately, we see that all the time.
Right. I think there are some organizations that are intuitively good at change management. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, some of it's experience. You might get an individual, or some organizations even have departments that are designed to work with change management. And it starts at the top. You've got to have a very good sponsor engagement and people managers that are involved because I believe it's all about communications. And so you need to have the communications coming down from the top, but also across the departments. And so, intuitively, I think it's something that it's kind of a grassroots effort that grows over time and it builds from there.
Okay, so we just went through, why change is important, and we know a plan is so important, especially if you're moving from one software system to another. Have you used any frameworks or methods for change management that are effective?
I have. The one I've adopted is ADKAR, which is a framework that's been promoted and has been developed by ProSci, an organization out of Colorado. And it's one that I've studied, not extensively, but I've spent a fair amount of time reading blogs, et cetera. They have a framework called ADKAR, which I've been promoting within our organization, and we found it to be quite successful. The A in ADKAR stands for awareness. You need to create the awareness of the need for change within your people. The D is desire. You have to create that desire for them to want to participate and engage in the change. K is the knowledge. Employees have to have the knowledge of the skills and the competencies needed to make that change. A is their ability to perform the skills. Without that, obviously, no one's going to be successful. And then R is the reinforcement. So once they've adopted the change and are becoming comfortable with it, you just have to continue to reinforce their adoption and use of that change. And one of the ways that we've found quite successful here in the last couple of years is kudos. We recognize our employees for adopting the change and continuing to use it. So I'm a big proponent of ADKAR by ProSci.
Okay, Dave. So thanks so much for going through that framework. I want to dig in a little bit around awareness and communication. So is there an alignment around this particular stage? So it's awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is there something to be said about organizational goals and aligning that with
what you're trying to make people aware of?
Yeah,
without a doubt. You're trying to make people aware of what organizational goals are so that they can all know that they're going in the same direction. So if they don't, if everyone's confused, why are we doing this? Then what kind of effort can you expect them to put into adopting anything you're trying to get them to adopt? When it comes to awareness, Dave is great at pushing communication, even if there's never too much. I don't think Dave's ever said that's a little bit much in communication.
I mean, I can say that that's unlikely to ever be the case.
Well, and I think that's one of the keys. Many organizations, perhaps they do feel like they're communicating too much, but as both of you've reinforced, I would agree. I don't think there is. In fact, I always caution all of us. I think we communicate too little because again and again, you hear people say, I didn't know about that. And, some of
the worst three words, no one told me.
Yeah.
When something happens, when change happens in an organization.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's that. And what's with them? I mean, what's in it for me? Why do I need to make the change? Support this change because I like the old school way of doing things. Those are some of the resistance mechanisms we run into. And again, all that, that feeds off of lack of awareness. No one told me we were starting to move in this direction. So why should I move?
And we try to make that a key component of our regular product updates that we do for those that are using our applications, is to make sure they know this is what we're changing, this is how we're rolling it out, this is why this is changing. In the awareness phase, you get a chance to start building that desire for the change. And you can either build a desire for the change or resistance, and that's not the R here. So you're trying to defeat that while building up their desire to engage with that change. And sometimes it's tying that to the goals, right? It's saying we're doing this for a good reason. It's going to meet these goals, and that will get people to accept change they might not have wanted to otherwise. But the better change is the one that gets them excited, and they're less resistant to it because they saw it coming ahead of time. So we like to do that with the product changes that we roll out into our environment here for our consumers.
Yep. Even if you think you've communicated well, do it at least one more time. It always feels like you're being overbearing, you're over communicating, but you're not, especially with something as important as what's going to affect your day to day.
Well, and one of the communication's a key, and one of the aspects of what Joe and his team do, and I find is great, is that they communicate in a fashion that is very informative, but it's not telling someone. They're actually talking to them and they're listening to them. They give the folks an opportunity to raise questions that maybe bring forth, Joe, I don't understand what's going on here. And I think that's
want
critical.
To hear a story. They want to hear a story, not an instruction manual. And so if you can say, this is what's happened, this is why we've come to this is what we're trying to accomplish, this is how we're doing it, gives them a chance. It does give them a chance to participate, but you're giving them a narrative rather than you're saying it has been decreed, it has been decided, this is going to change. And it's much easier to get their buy-in when you give them a narrative.
So what is a great way to get started? How do we get started? What are those keys to change management? I think you kind of alluded to it, Joe, with vision. But Dave, can you elaborate a little bit around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Joe said, you have to have the vision, and it has to be shared with everyone in the organization. It can't just be the CEO, or even at a project level, just the project stakeholder talking to the project manager. That's not going to happen. You need to have an engaged project stakeholder that's willing to talk to the entire project team on a frequent basis. They need to be involved to show why that change is necessary, why they're supporting that change, and back it. And to be successful, you can't rely on just one person. You need to have, they need to be surrounded by a team of support change managers. And people managers are critical, because research has shown people want to understand the big picture change from, we'll say, the CEO. But when it comes down to, well, how does that impact me? They want to hear from their people manager. So, that vision is coming from the top. It's being communicated, it's being reinforced, and everybody, for the most part, is trying to move in the same, lockstep direction going forward, understanding what's taking place.
You don't want to find any space between the larger message that's going out and what people managers are communicating and reinforcing. You find any space, then the people that are looking to be resistant to change will find the room to do it.
So, when we take that vision, if you will, and we bring it down to a project level, we always start off with, if not one, maybe a couple of kickoff meetings where, we talk quite extensively again about, what's taking place, why it's taking place, maybe start to get into a little bit of the WIFM, what's not only the impact to you, but your entire department. How's that get represented on a cross-departmental basis? You're sitting in these meetings. Don't just, absorb. We want you to absorb the information, but also be thinking about what other impacts are there. Take that awareness and begin to turn it into desire, the knowledge, what has to change. And that's where I think we've been successful. It's with these cross-functional teams being staffed by team members that are willing to speak up. And maybe it's not even a change in their specific department, but one that they recognize for having been with us for X number of years.
There are things I think that are valuable in leading change, and pitfalls that people find themselves in, or areas that an organization might forget. And a big part of leading change is to not be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid if you don't know the answer, because sometimes people will challenge you and bring things to the table to say, this is changing, but have you considered this? Which I would also say, don't be afraid of your detractors. I mean, it's not everyone's always 100% on board. You have to hear your detractors to find out, is there something valuable in that message? Is there something that they are concerned about that we can make better and win them over? Those are the some extra milestones that get dropped sometimes that are useful, that can
Right.
make a program even better.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we, as your vendor, your software partner, can do to guide this framework. But at the end of the day, I think it's really an openness on your behalf as a client or as an organization just looking for some high-level change and success and movement from the way that it always was. So I think that's exactly right. Hearing your detractors, acting where it's appropriate, staying the course. That feels like really good advice to give to these organizations who are looking to do this hard stuff. And everyone's doing this hard stuff right now. So there will be those detractors. How do we handle that? How does an executive stakeholder and their software partner handle resistance to change?
Well, again, I kind of look at it, you need to get those people managers involved. They need to sit down, maybe even just have some good old-fashioned heart-to-heart discussions with that individual that is resistant to change, to understand why. Maybe we haven't done a good job of explaining why the change is necessary or what's in it for that particular individual, or maybe they're just scared of the change. And I think it's critical that the people manager do that, because that's the person that's got the one-on-one relationship with that employee that may be resistant. And they have to be a good listener. They have to be open to understanding why, that person is a detractor. And to what you and Joe have said, maybe that person's got a reason. That's a good reason as to why they are pushing back a little bit.
I find the majority of the time, the most important thing you can do is make them feel heard. You might just come back and reiterate, here are the goals that the organization is trying to meet. This is what we've considered. We hear you. This is where that sits. But I think that being heard definitely helps cut through that resistance.
Okay, so we spent tons of time talking about the people side of change. Honestly, one of the most critical pieces of this, because software really is run by people. But what about the technical side of things? How are those people, how can they stay aligned with the technical side of a project? I think we touched on this a little bit, but is there more that can be said about making sure that these are all part of the task list in a change management project?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, project management is, to my mind, and I know there's different philosophies, but that's project management is where I bring in the technical components and the change management components together. And, one of the ways that we do that is, not only at the senior management level, where we have a change awareness forum where we talk about various changes that are either active or will be forthcoming to ensure we have awareness at that level. But when I get down into the project level, what we do, the first step I take is staff it with the appropriate team members from the various departments. And certainly I don't know who all that always is. So I go to the department heads, again, those people managers, and ask them, about this project, who is the best representative or representatives that you have to staff the project? And when they do that, they're taking into account not only the technical aspects of the change, but who is that individual within their department that can help change some of their, what I'll call their people processes, which are their business processes. What changes need to take place there? So I meld the two together, and I view my role as the project managers, making sure those technical or subject matter SMEs on that particular software change are very much aligned with the people change, and we pull it all together.
He's trying to find champions.
Yeah.
You need a champion in all those areas. And sometimes that champion is the one that helps the less technical folks understand if it's a highly technical change. If we're doing something to the organization that seems very large and it's mostly on the technical side, and now everyone has to dance to a different tune, you need translators. And so that's who your champions are. Sometimes it's just getting everyone to behave differently.
Absolutely. I would also like to add that sometimes your champion is a user, it's an employee. Because, as much as this impacts organizational leadership and technicians, it's certainly, or in a workforce management project, it's going to affect the employee who punches in every day. So if we can find champions at that level, that makes a much more prepared and communicative process for the whole.
Well, I think that you're definitely right, Kim. You've got to have champions at that level because they are the ones that use it every day and they know what needs to be implemented, and the little, I'll call them tips, techniques, best practices that can be implemented within their specific organization that will work well for them. And that's not, the same little best practice may not always work in one organization in exactly the same fashion as it may in another.
I also think the power of word of mouth is critical in these situations. You have that champion just really talking to all their friends and their colleagues about why it's important or how it's changed their day to day. I think it just really speaks volumes for an effective system from end to end. Just get those users on board as early and as often as possible.
Oh, totally agree. We all know how strong the grapevines can be. So the more you can get that groundswell of support for the change and understanding what the change is, absolutely. Very critical.
All right. So we've talked about this really from a high level, but do we have, Dave or Joe, can you share any success stories that you've recently seen, organizations that have really started to implement change?
One example was with Pay on Demand, in that an organization onboarded everyone with, here's Pay on Demand. You can sign up for it at the clock. You can sign up for it on your mobile phone. And it was almost obvious who did this. The first person that signed up just started telling everyone how easy it was and how great that change was for them. They immediately became an announcer for Pay on Demand, and that they were bringing people up to the clock and showing them how to sign up and walking them through the process. Like, hey, you just put in your phone number, get a text, put in your info, you're off and rolling. And that it wasn't a big technical challenge, right? But it was a level of championing that really made a big difference with that healthcare organization in an area that, people needed that service. But even if it's something that I can sit down with you and explain, you need this, you want this will help you. This can get you out of other situations that are less ideal. There's a lot of predatory things that happen in the world, where Pay on Demand is on this mission to make that better and to give people an easy path to get access to their wages now. And you have someone just shout from the rooftops in this company, and it was like they set a fire and everyone starts signing up for it. It was awesome. And so that was just an example of getting that grassroots champion and them having an easy path to get there. We tried to lay out the easiest technical way for people to get engaged with this service. We brought everyone to it, but I think that made a really big difference as someone was empowered to champion that.
Yeah, that's a great example of champions, because my opinion is that no matter how much communication the corporation was going to put out around the service, because it has to do with your paycheck and your money, you really aren't listening until you hear it from your peer. So yeah, that example, I remember it well, and it's still happening today. I think many of our Pay on Demand clients, really the growth is being ushered in by these champions, by the employees who are using this and signing up and telling their friends and their colleagues. It's an amazing case study for making sure that the right people have heard the value of the thing that you're doing, the change you're trying to make, the product or the services that you're offering.
Yeah, make it easy so that your champions can really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've also seen larger organizations that are long-term care, skilled nursing facilities around the country. And some fairly large ones have dealt with the need to change their solution to WorkSync. And so instead of having all of these disparate ways of doing things, they want to get them all on board. That's a tough sell because everyone has developed their own way of doing things. They've all got their own Excel spreadsheets. Some of them had, applications they had grabbed themselves and had somewhat implemented. And there were pluses and minuses all over the place to how they were doing things. And so now it gets to, we're going to come in there and as an organ to business and say, what are the goals here? And so I think having a good, clear understanding up front with that organization on what is it that you're trying to achieve, what is most important to you, and getting that message from the top down. One of the places that I see disconnects in when we're doing this kind of business to business change management together, hand in hand, is the deciders, the decision makers, that we're going to do this and we're going to do this with you, are not always the people that then have to do that with us. And so sometimes we have to win over the change management folks right away by coming in with our method and saying, here's how we're going to engage with you. And maybe you can speak to that method a little bit more, Kim, on what we're doing with WorkSync. But that gets us into, now we've got dozens of sites, dozens of facilities with a scheduler who's trying to deal with 100 beds and making sure they have the right staffing. Every one of them thinks they have a unique challenge. And most of the time they kind of do. Like that's true. So how can we get everyone on board that this is going to be the right solution for everyone? Can be a tricky task, and it's over communication. It's making sure they're highly aware this is coming. This is what we hope to achieve, and communicating upfront the value. If you save the value and say, well, they should figure that out on their own, you've already lost. You got to put that value right up front and say, we're coming in. This is what we're gonna make employees' lives better. We're gonna make the scheduler's life better, especially. And this is how everyone can be happier if we move forward with this and we do it well. And then you have to hear them out. And I think that's one of the areas that we do really well at, is to say, let's hear the detractors. Let's walk through this. Let's walk through it conceptually. Let's hear what people's concerns are. Let's address those concerns and be willing to change your plan. Because if there's a rigidity that says, well, this is what we signed up for exactly, this is how it's going to go, then you're basically just telling the detractors, I'll hear you, but you're kind of being steamrolled. I mean, but you obviously can't change the whole plan for one site. So it's having a good team managing that project that can deal with those concerns and be able and willing to pivot when needed, or to address what those detractors are concerned about in a more specific and individualized way, to get them on board. So we've had a lot of implementations of our solutions like that, where we've had to deal with an organization that's got those layers. You have the corporate office, and then you've got the folks off in these locations just trying to make it work. I mean, they might as well be in some cases, they might as well just be their own business. They're not, but they live in that reality day to day. And you want them all to be on board. And that's kind of like where your detractors are is also where you got to find your champions. And so we did kind of, in one example I'm thinking of in particular, we did kind of pick out maybe one of the heavier detractors to say, if we can make it work here, we can make it work everywhere. And really try to tackle those challenges as needed, try to take out the immaterial challenges, the things that were not going to really affect the success, but just reasons to not be on board. That I don't want my cheese moved, et cetera. To really build a champion out of your worst detractor. And if you get that in a spread out organization that has good communication, I mean, sometimes these places are like a very independent bunch of sites, but sometimes it is, you get that one site that's a champion all of a sudden, and you can't tell them this ahead of time. You can't put this on the brochure, but all of a sudden they almost become a support desk. They start helping their friends. Then they start encouraging people and how to engage with things and how to make it better. They start telling success stories. You want to tell them that they might end up helping their friends because they might be like, I don't have time for that. But they find the time because they're excited, because they've engaged with it and they're happy. So we've seen a lot of projects like that over the last few years, especially with, pre-COVID, skilled nursing wasn't an easy business to schedule in. And mid-COVID, and now are we post-COVID? It's definitely gotten harder. It's gotten harder to find people. It's gotten harder to deal with the day-to-day challenges. And so these are people that are under a great deal of stress. And we pick that as, one of our places that we try to excel in, where people are most stressed out. So that's what I've seen in our ability to help organizations succeed in fairly difficult change management scenarios.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for being here today. Before I let you go, any parting thoughts that may inspire our listeners to make a plan or to get started with these keys to change? Dave?
Obviously, you have to be prepared. Preparation up front's key. And then clearly ongoing support. Those folks need to be recognized for the fact that, it can be a big effort to make a change, but it can also be a huge win. And, as Joe outlined, there's several good scenarios where we've had some big wins, and it's just, a way to pull all it together. It's very nice.
I would, the only thing I would add to what Dave's saying is empathy. From the top to the bottom of an organization, as you're trying to lead this organization through change, have empathy with what they're going through, the daily struggles of a scheduler, what it's like to try to have to juggle shifts and trade with people, what it's like to be at the top of this, hoping it's all going well and getting nothing but data. What kind of data really gives them that picture and that comfort level that it's working or can properly identify where the problems are. From every corner of an organization that you intend to affect with a software change, have empathy for what everyone's going through and do your best to find out, even ahead of time, definitely ahead of time, what their struggles and pain points are. Everyone's worth seeing and hearing. You can have the detractors be anywhere and it cause a change management program to struggle.
Well said, Joe.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for being here and talking about organizational change. I will be following up this episode with a conversation about the work sync methodology for change called ADAPT, which is really heavily influenced by ADKAR. We've used this in our work sync implementations and projects, and we find that it's really a simple approach to a really complex problem that most organizations have. So looking forward to sharing that all with you. But for now, let's say thanks to Dave and Joe. Much appreciated. Looking forward to chatting with you about potential change management projects in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you, Kim. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kim.